Thanks to everybody. I'm absolutely delighted to have taken up this position as chair of CEF. It's a job I always thought was a really important one. I think the forum has a really important role to do, particularly at in these challenging times. So I do look forward to getting to know everybody and working with you all over the next few years. I'm delighted actually that we are welcoming Professor Siobhan O'Neill, who has given us our time today and who has recently taken up this very important role of mental health champion. I don't think anybody could underestimate the importance of this role given the enormity of the issues that we're all facing across the public services. We've got Brexit, we've got climate change, we've got pressure in public services following 10 years of austerity. And yet it was quite clear during the political talks last year that led to the resumption of the institutions that mental health issues were one of the key concerns for the political parties. And indeed that's reflected in the New Decade, New Approach document. And of course, since then, we've now had the coronavirus pandemic, which will have short, medium, and indeed long-term psychological impacts on society as a whole, on our organisations and on us as individuals and crucially as leaders too. So I'm really looking forward to hearing Siobhan's presentation, and I would encourage you all to raise any concerns, ask any questions you have. After we hear from Siobhan, we'll also hear from Anne Donaghy, who has coordinated the development of a mental health and wellbeing strategy and action plan for local government and the housing executive, and that has just been published. I think it's been very encouraging to see how local government has taken and indeed given a strong lead in this, and it'll be interesting to hear how Anne has harnessed so many organisations to achieve agreement on what is clearly a very comprehensive and well-structured strategy. We'll also hear from Michael Dunlop, with whom many of you will be familiar. Michael is an NLP practitioner and has been working with many of our members on dealing with the impact of the pandemic on, again, both individuals and teams. Before handing over to Siobhan, just a few points on how the session will run. Siobhan, I think your presentation will probably take around 40 minutes and slides will be circulated to people after the meeting. We'll then hear from Anne and from Michael before opening the floor for questions or comments. I'd encourage everybody to use the chat function, which we'll monitor to feed in any thoughts as the session progresses, and Anne is going to moderate the Q&A session. We are due to finish at 1:30 and we'll stick pretty quickly to that because I know you're all very busy. If you have any problems with your connection, it's worth disabling your video feed to create extra bandwidth. And if you have any further technical problems, please message Pamela Carson, our business manager, who will endeavour to help you out with that. Finally, we'll be recording this session and we'll make it available on the CEF website afterwards. So without further ado, Siobhan, over to you. Look forward to hearing your presentation.
Thank you, David. Thank you so much. It's a pleasure to be here today, and thanks for inviting me to do this talk. We're just getting the slides up, I think. Give us a wee second. Here we go. Okay, so that's my logo. And today's talk, if we go to the next slide, thanks. So the webinar plan is I'm going to be talking a bit about my role. What I'm planning to do is interim mental health champion. I'll be talking about coping during COVID and the things that are going on around us, and a little bit about leadership and growth and creativity, because all of those things are possible. And then we'll end with a Q&A. So it's not that there's one section, but the other two is kind of blended together. But you see as it goes, there's not too many slides. It's mostly me talking, but I really would welcome your thoughts and questions at the end. That's how I learn. So ask me anything, challenge me, please. That would be really good, actually, if you could do that. Okay, so my role, I'm interim mental health champion, and I'm going to be in this role until around April, and that's when the public appointment process is going to be complete, hopefully. And at the minute, of course, it is my intention to apply for this. I'm really passionate about the work and I'm really enjoying it so far. I've got so much support. There's really four elements to the role. The role is funded across the different government departments. They've all contributed to this, so they all support it. And I really have to say, the support has just been overwhelming from the ministers and from all of the departments I've been engaging with so far. I guess the first one is as a public advocate. I'm a public advocate to the government, to all of the government departments. That means I am the voice of the public, essentially. It is my role to learn about people's experiences as citizens of Northern Ireland and as users of Northern Ireland's mental health services. I want to know about the problems, obviously, and understand what happens when there is, for example, a suicide. But I also want to know about what it looks like when Northern Ireland's mental health services work well, and when it works, when it's functional for people. What does that mean? How does that look too, so that we can build on our strengths here? And it helps that I have around 20 years of experience as a professor and in other roles at Ulster University, where I've conducted loads of research studies looking at rates and even some qualitative work with people who've been affected by the Troubles and have mental health challenges here as well. So that public advocacy role is so important. And it includes not just members of the public, but also talking to professional groups, liaising with fellow academics, understanding campaign groups, motivations, motives, what they want to achieve, and talking to groups from the community and voluntary sector as well, people who are working on the ground. So really anybody that participates in that whole mental health service delivery, or helping people with mental health problems or issues that may lead to mental health problems, which is part of my remit as well. The third bit there is policy influence. So I will be working with the government on key policies around mental health and wellbeing. As I said, I'm funded the different government departments, but the main one, I guess, would be health, and I am working on the development of the new mental health strategy. So that's going to be co-designed along with members of the public, and some of that work has already started. Indeed, some of the bodies that are going to be developing that strategy have been set up, and I'm on there, I'm at the table. And that's really important. It allows me to bring the learning from the public. It also allows me to bring the knowledge as an academic and the networks that I would have nationally and internationally, so that we can make sure that we develop a mental health strategy that's actually planning a world-leading mental health service that uses the most up-to-date evidence to create services that are really going to work for people. So that part of my job is really important. I'm also working with other government departments, though, not just health. So, for example, infrastructure. I was involved in the Future Forward project in Derry, Londonderry, which is my hometown. And that really essentially is a project around regeneration and positive mental health, but it's also a suicide prevention project, because there is an issue around deaths, sadly, in the River Foyle. So that's something I've been doing. I've also been working with the company who are doing the West Link regeneration plan, again, using my suicide prevention and public places expertise and knowledge, and having worked with Samaritans and their media guidelines and conducted research in this, I bring quite a lot to that role. So that's some areas in infrastructure. Another good example is actually with the Department for Education. I've been doing some work on mental health and young people, and we've done a survey of Northern Ireland schools to find out what's happening there, and we did that with and for the Department for Education, and I'm now on those key groups that are planning our mental health in schools framework. And again, that's something that's going to be launched quite quickly, and there's several events that I can contribute to in that area as well as bringing those links and the people that I know from other universities who specialise in this into the conversation and at the table in terms of advising the department. I've also been talking to Justice and communities about various different projects that they're running. So Justice, of course, is around mental health in the criminal justice system, and communities would be around particular high-risk groups in various areas and communities across Northern Ireland to look at things we can do to help there. So the policy influence is a key part, and really a mental health champion would be seen as a conduit between the population and those very diverse groups that are out there who are mental health service users or who are living in Northern Ireland, and then that conduit between them and government, so that we can influence what happens to make life better for everybody here. The final bit of it is the network hub bit, and that's where I have a communications person to help me work with the media to deliver key messages and to make sure that people across the province understand what they might expect from mental health services, what they can do to help themselves and promote their own mental well-being, and where to go and what to do if they need help, and what are the signs of mental health problems. So I'm doing a lot of podcasts and radio programs and panel discussions aimed at various different groups there to get key messages out about my role, about what I'm doing and what people are doing across government to help with the mental health problem here in Northern Ireland. And one of the things I want to bring forward is like a directory of services or a common place where people can go. So the Mind in Your Head website is actually really, really good, but I think we can build on that so it becomes a repository for primary care, for example, to go to so that they know what's out there to help people. One of the problems that I can see when I'm only in the job a month, but I can see there's so many groups on the ground doing things, there's so much available for people, and yet there's still a sense of hopelessness and despair about the lack of services and the lack of support. And now I recognise there are many, many problems and gaps, but it is not all bad. The picture is not as gloomy as people might want to think. So this is an important part of my job, is to get messages like that out there and help people understand what they can do to help themselves. So it's rather, can we move on to the next slide? Thank you. Super. So it's rather ironic that I'm taking up this post in a time of a pandemic. It couldn't be worse timing, and in many ways it couldn't be better timing for me, because all of it has to fit in with our lives. And I'm a single mother of a 3-year-old. And when I was first asked to do this, and I was literally phoned one Monday as I was flying out of the house to just done a lecture, and I was going off to pick up the child from the childminder. And I was asked to do this, and my big question was, is this going to be in Belfast every day? Because I can't do that. And then, of course, we're in lockdown, and it's all about working from home. So being able to work flexibly in a pandemic is crucial for me to be able to function in this job. So whilst the pandemic is undoubtedly terrible for people, there are upsides to it as well, and I'm really starting to see that now. I would see the current COVID-19 pandemic as a crisis, and for many people a trauma, and it's a huge source of stress and even loss. And I think we need to really understand it as that, and understand that people have suffered significant losses. So models of stress and models of loss from a psychological perspective, these are models that we can apply to the current context. And when we're dealing with people throughout this time, I think it's important that we really, really appreciate we're dealing with people who are stressed and who have lost significant things, and who are often going through a period of grief as a result of that loss. So that's what we need to bear in mind. I've set out on this slide some of the key losses that people have experienced, and the fears and the causes of stress. So keeping ourselves safe, that was something hugely important for me with a history of pneumonia. I was convinced that I was going to get this virus. And I had my life insurance details and everything out at one point, and I'm not even joking, like, because I thought if I get this, I'm doomed. And, you question all of your decisions in life really when something like this comes up. So that fear and keeping ourselves safe, and then there was the worry about other people and people whose lives we couldn't control and what they were doing, older people and even younger people, when we look at what they're doing, and the worry that's there about our loved ones is huge. There's a loss of contact, community and connection, and these are the things that we cling on to at a time of stress. These are the things that will get us through the difficult times their lives, and yet we're not able to have that. Certainly that physical connection has been a huge loss for many, many people, and there's very strong biological reasons why we need that physical connection with others, so we need to try to recreate that in some way. Huge changes to our routines, not always unwelcome changes, I have to say. I was enjoying working from home, cooking more, leading a kind of more relaxed pace of life, and that was good. But for other people, not being able to socialise, not being able to see family and friends, those changes to the routines were very, very disruptive and difficult, and created loneliness for people as well. And not just people who live alone, people who live in families or in situations that they're not kind of completely happy with. That loneliness there is huge for people. So there's also of course, the impact of the loss of life, the loss of health for people who have survived the virus, who have long-term difficulties, and the loss of livelihoods. And that's something that we're increasingly concerned about in the suicide prevention community, because we know that the threat of job loss is huge. It's a threat to everything, really, and that's for many people actually their primary concern right now, and we need to acknowledge that. So the loss of lives and the loss of livelihoods, and then witnessing the impact in other countries, bearing witness to other people's suffering. And I know at the start of this, I was immersed in the news coverage, watching all the footage from Italy particularly, very, very distressing. And remember, when you're watching something, when you're seeing something on social media, your body responds as if you're right there. Right, so you're bearing witness to that. You're not a passive observer. You're getting involved in it when you're thinking about that. So your brain is responding in the same way at the end of the day to all of this stuff. So there's learning can be taken from that as well. And finally, the uncertainty about the future. I mean, the future has always been uncertain, right? But I think most of us lived our lives not really appreciating that. Now the uncertainty is massive for people, and particular groups are feeling that more than others. So those are all the sources of stress and the difficulties that people have been dealing with. And let's move to the next slide. So in terms of stress, it's important to recognise and remember that we are, at the end of the day, we are animals. That doesn't sound very pleasant particularly, but we're biological beings. And our bodies have evolved to respond to stress in a particular way to keep ourselves safe, to allow us to survive and to allow us to reproduce, so that we can keep going on, that humanity can continue. So the stress response system that we have is something that was designed for a life where we were being attacked by wild animals all the time, and it served us very, very well. On the rare occasion that we were under serious threat, our bodies react with what scientists might call the fight or flight response, which is prepping up the body to run away or fight. And it's great because the body just goes into it goes into kind of fight or flight mode. It changes setting. It becomes much more activated. Our muscles are preparing for running or fighting. All our blood is kind of going to the heart to keep us alive and to stop the peripheral bleeding that might happen if we were injured, that might end up killing us. Our digestive processes, our immune system, they all go kind of onto standby. They're sort of dialed down a bit because they're not quite so important in that moment. And the body's energy is about those core functions. And of course we start to sweat, and we're getting geared up, our heart beats faster, and it really, really helps because it does prepare us for what's ahead, and it means we're activated, and it's good for us that this happens every so often and keeps us alive, and it's a thing that gets us through really, really difficult times. But the problem is when this is activated too often. So, you know, first thing in the morning, we look at our phones, we check Twitter, we see all the statistics from the night before, we switch on the news, it's bad news. All the time we're bearing witness to the stress and trauma, and it is impacting on our brain and body in this way. And certainly at the start of the pandemic, for the first 2 weeks, I was in fight or flight mode a lot of the time. Real difficulty sleeping, very, very difficult to plan lectures. There was work that needed to be done right there. And I could see other academics that were churning out all these surveys and getting ethical approval. And you know, it was nearly like a race, whereas I was completely paralysed. I was kind of like, I can't do this, I'm going to die, my child's going to be left without, you know, all of these catastrophizing kind of thoughts. So that's how I was. For other people, fight or flight response meant that they did science, you know, and they got work done, which was great. But that's not how I responded. So the fight or flight response is very, very natural. It's a sign that our bodies are working well, and we should never judge it in a negative way. You know, it's really important to remember that self-compassion is hugely important. That this is what we are as human beings, and we can't change that. That's beyond our control in many ways. We can learn how to cope with it and how to manage it, though. So can I get the next slide? Thanks. So what are the normal effects of stress in the body? And the emphasis here is normal. It affects how we think. We're easily distracted because we're looking over our shoulder. We're about to be attacked, remember? It's difficult to concentrate on long-term projects, and we have difficulty remembering things, right? So if you're working, this is really tough. So you should bear that in mind when you're trying to do anything. This is not going to be your best time. Emotionally, we will have trouble relaxing because our bodies aren't designed to relax whenever there's something chasing us. You know, we feel irritable and easily agitated and anxious and threatened. So we may misread other people's cues in that state. You know, we see everybody else as an aggressor potentially. And again, that's the biological response. Totally natural, can get us into all sorts of problems and trouble if we don't recognize it for what it is, you know, if we sort of start believing it. In terms of our physical health, we could have an increase in energy or a decrease in energy. There's lots of tension in the body. We can feel restless, sweating, easily startled. There can be changes in appetite. We might want to eat loads of food to store up energy, or we mightn't be able to eat at all, and neither state is good. Because if you can imagine an animal that's quite sort of hungry all the time, who's not really going to be able to sit down and plan and focus. And difficulty sleeping, of course, is a big thing. And sleep is so hugely important to keep us calm and relaxed and focused. And the final wee bit there is there's the social effects of stress. We want to be alone. We will be blaming others and getting into arguments about things that we shouldn't really be getting because we misread the cues, because our brain is in a different mode. So we need to be kind to ourselves when all of these things happen, but we also need to recognise that this is not a state in which we can produce our best work, regardless of who we are and where we are. So we must deal with this. We must see it for what it is and deal with it and move past it and through it. So can I get the next slide, please? So this is my way of trying to conceptualise what's happening in terms of the fight or flight response. I've put it up there as 3 different stages, and I don't know where I got the term circuits of survival from. I listen to lots of podcasts, so it's probably pinched from somewhere, so apologies for that. But I call this the circuits of survival. Our perception of danger triggers a drop down. Normally we should be in safe and social. That's the best way. That's the way we want to be. We're productive, creative, calm, engaged. That's how we would like to be most of the time, to function really well, to do our best work. However, as animals, we are designed to go into fight or flight whenever we perceive that something's threatening us. So the danger could be the very real threat of a virus, or it could be something in our environment that reminds us of something that's happened to us in the past. So we can get triggered. This is kind of where the word trigger comes from. It's around post-traumatic stress disorder as well. But there can be triggers that will drop us into fight or flight. And everybody's triggers are different. And most people, coronavirus was a trigger or should have been a trigger. You know, some people went into denial, and there's still a lot of that about, you know, around the messages, and that's people's way of coping. But, you know, if we believe what we're being told, then we will be triggered into a sense of anxiety, fight or flight. When the threat is past, we can go back up into safe and social again. The fight or flight, we're mobilised, vigilant, aggressive. We need to fight. After all, avoidance, stress, shouting, running, anger, all of those things are primed when we're in that state. The third point there is shutdown. And that's where, so fight or flight is the stress part of it. Shutdown is what I would call the trauma, an overwhelming stressor that we really feel we can't cope with. No matter what our body does, it's just too much. And that's where we kind of go into freeze. And that's, I like to kind of explain this as like an animal playing dead. It's our body's designed just to completely dissociate, just to actually mentally move away. When you hear about people who've had really terrible experiences of abuse and they kind of move out of themselves, that's the state that they're describing, that shutdown state. And it can be a state where people feel suicidal because they just can't imagine any way out of that state. It's complete terror, hopelessness. And shutdown is a state, and trauma is a state that we can recover from. But if it happens too often, if we're moving down into fight or flight and shut down too often, it kind of recalibrates the threshold for each of those stages. So again, it's our species, it's our human animal way of shaping the body and brain to live in the world that we live in. So if you get a lot of fight or flight, if you're a mum and you have a baby, and this is happening a lot, then the child's threshold for moving down into that state is going to be reduced a bit. They go down there that bit more easily. It serves them well to do that, or that's what the body thinks. So the repeated trauma and stress changes the thresholds for each stage, and some people, whenever they've had a lot of really bad things happen, they're either in constant fight or flight, or sometimes constant shutdown, where there's really no hope. There's nothing can bring them back into that calm, engaged, connected place. When we talk about trauma-informed care and trauma-informed practice, it's about really understanding those different states and knowing that whenever you have a wee child who's coming into school and they're aggressive and they're shouting and all of that, it could be because they've been plunged down into fight or flight that much because of what's been going on at home for them, that they just can't get back up again. Their bodies have just gone in there. The good news is that all of these things can be worked with, and we can train ourselves to move in between those different settings. But I think it's just so important to know that this is what we're dealing with. This is the brain and the body that we have. Can I get the next one there, please? I love my little meerkats. We're also animals that live in communities. And we need to understand that this neuroscience stuff that I'm talking about, this biological stuff, it happens at community level as well. We're a social species. We have what's called neuroception, and that's where we have this innate ability to work out when somebody else is stressed, when they're in fight or flight, or when they're in shutdown, when they really just aren't engaging with us at all. And it's really hard to explain how we do it. It's a very, very complex process. We can sense when someone's muscles are tense. We can sense from their eye movement. It's a subconscious thing that we have. But we need to know that it absolutely exists. Your partner, your family, and the people that you work with will be able to tell. Even when you're trying to fake it and hide it, they will be able to tell whenever you're not in that safe and social space. And they will know that they will not feel heard and that they will have difficulty connecting with you because you are in that aggressive mode. So it's so important to understand that these survival states, these cues, they're inherited from previous generations, but they work really well. And if one animal in the herd senses dangers, everybody else is on high alert. And for us, the herd is our family and it's our workplace. And you know what, if you're the leader of that herd, if you're the mummy or the daddy, or if you're the leader of an organisation, this is kind of multiplied by 1,000,000 times, because everybody's looking for you to set the tone. How are things right now? How must I be right now? What's happening here? And also as a leader, you have information that they don't have, remember, as well. So this is so important that this community neuroscience, that you understand that that's what's operating. It's also important to know that calmness, safety and a sense of well-being are also contagious. And by being a particular way, by being unsafe and social, you will transmit that to other people. Now, you will not be able to take away other people's problems, but you can at least put yourself in that best position to help them emotionally regulate, which is what we mean by moving from fight or flight to safe and social. You will help them regulate by being calm and regulated yourself. And you will help them digest whatever information you need to give them, and you will help them be better, more productive, calm people in the workplace and also in their homes, and that sort of ripples out across the community. So calmness, safety and a sense of well-being are also contagious. Leadership is so important. And when you look at leaders who have been absolutely incredible during this crisis, and Nicola Sturgeon's one that I would look to there, you can really see that calm, safety and sense of well-being that she has, that she, you know, it's not unrealistic, but you just feel more relaxed in her presence. And there are loads of them around, and I think our own leaders are doing really, really well on this stuff right now. The last press conference was really, really good. You know, so this is crucial. Can I get the next slide? So how do we cope in a pandemic? Well, I hope it's coming across that know that it's okay to feel anxious. It's a normal response. Be kind to yourself. There is no point in you heaping more trauma and, you know, criticizing yourself. Think about your self-talk. Where is that going? How would you respond to a friend or a wee child that was stressed and anxious, telling them that they're not good enough, that they're, you know, no, you don't do any of that stuff. You bring them back into a sense of calm, and then you work with them. You seek support using creative methods from a range of sources. I'm saying creative methods because you know, we're not able to do the face-to-face stuff, so you've got to do what you can from the right people. Practice gratitude and promote hope. Rewire your own brain. Every time you do something, you can create really good habits here. I do a written gratitude piece, which is just a line in a diary every day about my child that I'm going to give to her when she's 5, and somebody give me this diary, a line a day, you know, but it really works, because you see all the other lines and you try and keep it positive because you don't want your kid to know that actually you were really stressed. So this stuff works for me, but try and be grateful for what you have and keep thinking about that and keep doing that. There's some lovely meditations out there where you can kind of think of the loving kindness one is one example. Another one is think about if this was the last time you were doing this, how would you feel? How would you enjoy it? Try and be in the moment for that. Promote hope. What are your hopes and wishes? There is so much to be hopeful for right now. This pandemic will not last forever, and we're actually doing really, really well. When you think about it, for 6 months in, we're all doing okay. So we need to latch on to that. Control your exposure to media and news, because it does create stress. You need a certain amount of information. You need it from the right sources, and you actually don't need to be getting immersed in all of the stuff and the debates and everything that's happening right now from sources that aren't really trustworthy. So control your exposure. Think about manageable goals that will help you achieve your larger goals. We're thinking about what your bigger goals are and what your core values are. What do you stand for? That will help direct your action whenever you are stressed, when you're in a crisis. What are your core values? Act in alignment with those. Whether it's relationships, family, creating a better northern, whatever it is, like, think about how what you're doing right now fits with that. You should try and manipulate your body into safe and social. You can tell your body that everything's going to be okay. You can go for a run and your body thinks it's fought the animal, and then that's rid of that. And whenever you exercise, whenever you move, you're telling your body that you're addressing this stressor, this threatening thing. You're dealing with it. and your brain automatically calms down there. Also think, I mean, it's not just about running or workouts or anything like that. Repetitive sensory actions are really, really useful. Think about what would you do with a wee baby who was highly stressed. It's the same stuff. It could be rocking, it could be sensory stuff, nice fabric, massage, smells. All of that will help bring your body away from that fight or flight response. Do things that give you pleasure, that you used to find pleasurable before, and your brain will remember that, and it will help again move you away from that fight or flight into safe and social. Can I get the next slide, please? We're having too much fun. Basically, don't do the pleasurable things that might make things worse, and there's a temptation to do that. So yeah, a glass of wine is never really going to be a big problem, but a bottle of wine every night's not going to serve you well in the long run, and your body will respond in a particular way the next day as well. So just monitor your stress management techniques and how they're working out for you. Coffee, sugar, alcohol, drugs, you know, they maybe all have their place, but just really reflect on whether or not they are serving you and make up your own mind about what's working for you. Constantly worrying is certainly not going to work, but it's really hard to avoid that. And it's just important to prepare. You know, positive thinking is not going to get us out of this. We need a plan of action. So make your plan and prepare, and then try and think about something else, focus on something different. The 5 ways to well-being are really good for that. So let's keep learning, give, stay active. All of those things are things you can do that will take you away from the worrying. I did an interview with the Telegraph where I tried to explain, I don't think we should try too hard to relax. We should just think about moving from one activity to another. So learning, reading a book is really about learning. So don't try and force yourself to relax and sort of sit on the sofa and enjoy a TV program that's actually not just you. Do something that's serving you, that's moving you from one task to another, and you will find that shift will be relaxing as well. It will have the same function. It's good to connect with others, but co-ruminating can actually make things a lot worse because they will give you ideas that you don't already have or that you don't already need. So, you know, really think about who you're worrying out loud with. Are you planning, or is this just a co-rumination that's going to bring you away from your safe and social space that you need to be in order to do your best, to be your best self? Next slide. Thank you. Again, maximise your capacity to cope. It all starts with the physical. If in doubt, attend to the physical. Physical activity, think about your core values, problem solve, achievable goals. All of these things are things we should be doing. If the unhelpful emotions come along, just accept them. Just, yeah, that's the way we are. Yeah, my body's working here. Now, activities that are aligned with my core values. Maintain a routine every day. Try and get up at the same time. You're probably all doing this already anyway when you're working from home. At the start though, people find this quite difficult. And think about what worked for you in the past. Think about what's been working for the last 6 months, you know. If somebody told us in March that we were still going to be talking about this, it would have been a very depressing thought. But nonetheless, here we are, and most people have done okay. And try a bit of cognitive restructuring. Try and find good in this somewhere, whether it's getting more time away from the commute. For me, it's about more time with my child at a crucial period in her life. So really just think about it. Is there anything good that can come out of this possibly? So what do we need from leaders? Well, as I tried to explain, we need role modeling. All of us need to be role models of self-care and self-compassion. And we need to be able to own our mistakes and acknowledge whenever we acted from a position of stress and didn't make the best decisions. And once we're able to do that, well, you know, without overdoing it, of course, once we're able to do that, others will trust us more, and they will be able to then take their cues and their lead from us. I would argue for selective, authentic vulnerability. You don't need to tell people all of your problems, but it is useful for the people that you work with to know that you're a human being as well, that you have a life too, and that, you know, you can be authentic, you can talk about the difficulties that you've had, but how you've you've got through them, I think that's the main message as a leader. You want to be directing people in a certain way. You need to supply information and you need to be trustworthy. So I think that's absolutely crucial. We need to know that leaders can give us the information at the time that we need it, and that we can trust that they'll tell us the truth. You probably do need to be accessible in a way that you weren't before, but that doesn't mean that you have to drop the self-care. So you should never be setting yourself on fire to keep others warm. That is just, it doesn't work at all. In fact, it has the opposite effect. Attention and empathy. My parenting guru, John of Fortune, talks about going straight to A&E if there's a problem with your child. Attention and empathy. Give the behaviour attention, find out what is behind, even if it's a negative behaviour. Empathise and then redirect, try and problem solve, find a way through. It should always be about problem solving, but if you go straight to the problem solving, people feel they're not heard, they're not understood, and that can leave them in that very unsettled state where they can't move on and they can't problem solve. So you need to do a bit of that attention and empathy, but then move to problem solving. What's going to get us through? What can we control about this situation and what can we not control? And start to separate those out so that you can problem solve. And we're going to all need to be flexible here. And I think one of the things we've learned in the pandemic is that we can be very, very flexible and we can find creative solutions very quickly if we need to. Next one. Okay, so what have we learned already? This is, there's a negative and positive side to all of these things. But money was found, surprisingly enough, to help people. And I'm hoping that, in terms of preventing further job losses, that more money can be found to protect the economy and to protect people's jobs and livelihoods, because they're so, so important for our mental health and for our physical health as well. Populations can adapt and innovation is possible in a way that we would never have believed. Social agency is possible. Solidarity is also possible. We shifted how we see our views of who are our key workers, the people who are really important, who help us put food on the table, who look after us when we're ill, who look after vulnerable people. So let's try and retain a sense of that community and solidarity if we can. We found that science, this one's good for me, that science can guide progress and that academics, can be valued in a particular way, although not always, and there's a lot of debate and questioning around at the minute as well. And things that we thought were impossible before this, we actually discovered we could do them. We can set up systems where people can work from home. We can be much more flexible in our approach, and we can be really, really strong in the face of adversity and get through terribly difficult situations and stay apart from people that we really love. So, it really has shown us that anything is possible, but it's also been really, really hard, and it's important to acknowledge that. So it would be nice now if we could have other people's views on this. I feel like I'm talking into just the kind of the air here. So I hope that's been kind of useful, and I'd love to know what you think about it all.
Absolutely, Siobhan, and that's been a real tour de force, I think, across a whole range of issues that we all need to be thinking about in the public sector. And I think just in the last 40 minutes or so, you've demonstrated the real value in the public sector engaging really well with academia, and there's an awful lot there for us to gain. And I think you're showing as well the importance of academia understanding the structures that we're working within the public sector, and even seeing some of the good stuff that we really struggle to get across in the media and other channels. And thank you to everyone who's been engaging on the chat function. That's really useful. We will pick up those points. Before we do that, I'm going to bring Donna in, who is the Chief Executive of Middle East Antrim Council. Has also spearheaded over the last 8-9 months the development of a mental health and wellbeing strategy and action plan for the whole of the local government sector, which is a feat in itself, that you've managed to get that to publication over what has been such a challenging period for everyone, particularly in local government. So Anne, if I could hand over to you now, just to get a flavour for the sorts of issues that you were taking into consideration in leading this work and where you hope to see it going.
Thank you, Anne, and congratulations, Professor O'Neill, on your appointment. I'm delighted that your post has been filled. I think mental health has never been more important in Northern Ireland, and for me it was one of the most welcome posts that has been appointed in recent times. So congratulations, and look forward to working with you. I had the privilege of being asked by Solus, which is the chief executives, the 11 chief executives working together, to, I suppose, lead up a health and wellbeing group for local government. And it became really apparent very, very quickly that mental health was the one thing that we ignored. The stigma was rounded, and it was something that, you know, it was okay to have a broken arm, it was okay to have the flu, it was okay to have all of those things, but it sort of wasn't okay if you had a mental health issue, or you were having a stressful time. And if you were off on stress, it kind of looked like, oh, is that real? Or, you know, maybe they're just pretending to get a bit of time off and all of that. So it became very apparent to me that there was only one way we were going to deal with this, and was to take that stigma out, to talk about it and to put it on the table. And that wasn't easy to do, because I think some people maybe thought, like, why is she raising this? This is a kind of an issue. We don't go there, you know, people have to just get on with their job and that's it. I suppose we got there, a lot of hard work from a lot of people, and like, I am not an expert in mental health at all. So, you know, what we did was we asked people in local government, what's your needs, what's your issues, and, you know, how are we going to work through them? And become really, really apparent that, you know, stress is not confined to any particular race, creed, age, and indeed it's not confined to the workplace. And, you know, even in my own life, you know, I had a child with Down syndrome, and the stress of that was huge. But so many, so, you know, I would be compassionate towards it, but at the same time, you have to be compassionate, but not a walkover. So that was that tension of leadership, of having passion and having that, you know, I suppose that here and here, but yet not still getting the job done, and not being seen as an organisation that gets so tied up in it that everybody is sort of thinking what's going on here. So really at the heart of our strategy, I know, having worked in local government all my life, there's strategies for everything. There's strategies about strategies, and, you know, it's a certain type of people that will read them, and there's a certain type of people that will never read them. And so for me, it had, all the writing was really important, but the whole cultural thing was important. How did we get the culture in and forget about what was written and printed? So we'll come up with a logo, and the logo is simple. It's called Ask. And, you know, I always believe ask and you will receive. And it does, and people in Northern Ireland, if you ask for something, most people will give. And so it was around that ask. And for me, ask means accept. So as a profession, as a family, you talk about we're community, and local government is a big community of 12,000 staff. But we all have families that we can filter this down through. And like, for us, it was about how do you accept people have to look after their mental well-being as well as their physical. How is that acceptable? To support, not only to give them the tools, the mechanism, and say it's okay that this is happening to you, but also not write them off for career progression, and to not say, oh, you know, that it didn't stick with you the whole of your career, that it was okay to have a down week, month, year, and come back again. So, and I suppose that the care really was about knowledge, but I have changed my mind on that, and I now think it's about kindness, because for me, you know, a simple word, either way, can make or break somebody's mental health. So that's the sort of place to start. I suppose, but beneath all of that are loads of tools, strategies. We didn't start from a blank sheet, and one of the things that our health minister launched in my own council, Mid and East Antrim, last year was an app, and the app was just down on kids' phones and anyone's phone, and it just directed you to whatever service you wanted. Really, really powerful. And I will share that on with you afterwards. It's so simple, and people are using it right across Northern Ireland. So, and it was developed by a local man from Whitehead who had witnessed quite a number of suicides around his local area, and it was about just getting people the right path to be on and the right information. And I always say to my own staff, you know, there for the grace of God go I, you know, and that is really, really important to remember. It can hit anybody at any time in relation to anything. And, you know, and there's none of us immune to it, none of us. So I suppose when I look at where we're going now, time's limited. I don't intend to go through the strategy, but I just would ask you to remember, ask, and what that means, accept, support, and show some kindness in your leadership, and have a bit more knowledge about mental health. And I think that's hugely important. We are now encouraging all of our 11 councils to sign up to the Mental Health Charter for employers. That has been jointly led by the Quality Commission, Action Mental Health, Mindwise, Mental Health Foundation, and Neve. Absolutely brilliant. It's about that healthy workplace, a place where it's okay to be okay or not to be okay, and that works. I suppose moving forward on that, I from my own life experience, first become interested and started to understand mental health 15 years ago when a little girl lived beside me at 15 took her own life, and our whole community just broke down. And now I look 15 years on, and not very much has changed. You know, we're sitting in Northern Ireland with double the rate of the suicides in England. So I welcome, Siobhan, you being here, because, you know, there is so much to be done, and every strategy and every initiative is a step forward. But, you know, I think, you know, I saw someone on the chat had said, where is the mental health strategy for Northern Ireland? And, you know, it was one of the things that I commend Robin Swan for. You know, he has put his action behind it. There's 38 actions on that. I really want to see some of them being delivered, and that to me is the real focus. I was really pleased whenever he actually has a dedicated plan now for COVID, because there is no doubt about it. Like, COVID has changed us all. I know I've been working from home on and off with 2 kids, single parent with 2 kids is not easy, especially one with special needs. And as I said earlier on a conference call, at least my daughter has now met Arlene Foster and Diane Dodds in person. Maybe not the way I wanted, but she has. And so I suppose a lot of people have found the stress of COVID, working from home and trying to I suppose juggle all of that. And you know, what my staff miss the most, and they will tell me this, they miss the tea breaks, they miss the crack, they miss, you know, what happened at the weekend, you know, and even, you know, even the hug or the handshake, that has really been taken away from us. So I do recognise what you said, Professor, about the animals in communities, and we have lost that community in work. So whatever we have to do with our strategy, we have to find a new way to create new communities to help support our people. And finishing off, one of the things that really I think we need to move on, we get the statistics every day. I get the statistics of the number of people that has tested positive, the number of people that has tragically lost their lives, you know, and all of what the amazing health profession is doing. But there's no number ever put on the people having mental health issues around COVID, and how this unpredicted times is stressing. People are worried about their jobs, they're worried about money, they're worried about the future. So it's really difficult. You're not getting numbers, you're not getting that feedback that this is. So I hope that we all together can do away with the stigma, and don't let mental health be a stigma in the middle of COVID. It now more than ever needs to go. I suppose looking forward, I think that it's hugely important that we work together, and I commend the Chief Executives Forum, David and Anne, for actually having the courage to take this item onto the agenda. And you know, for us, I think if we can help people work together, address their mental health issues, and help them to look after their own health and well-being, we get better productivity, we get better results. So it's in everybody's interest. So I hope that gives you a bit of a feel for what we've done. We've a lot more to do, but anything that we have in local government, we're so willing to share. So thank you for the opportunity, Anne.
Great, thank you, Anne, and thanks for sharing that with us. It's really useful, and we will circulate the link to the strategy document to everyone on the call after the event. I want to bring in Michael Dunlop now, and many of you will be familiar with Michael. He's a twice certified NLP practitioner. He's done a lot of work on leadership and team development with our members over the last number of years, and he has focused his offering over the last 6 months to particularly support our members through the issues that are coming forward as a result of the pandemic. And Michael, if you could just give us a flavour of the sort of themes that you're seeing emerging from our members over the last 6 months, and the sort of guidance you would have for members going forward.
Absolutely. Thanks very much. Can I just say, Siobhan, thank you so much. That was fantastic. Thank you so much. You are definitely the right person in the right place at the right time. There is no two ways about it. And thank you for articulating so much better than me a lot of the stuff that we've kind of been talking about for the last 6 months. The other thing I have to do before I forget, I have to embarrass the life out of Anne and Pamela and Ross, because the way the Chief Executives Forum have risen to the challenge of all of this is incredible. What they have managed to do and produce in terms of support has been brilliant. One of the things Anne's been the driving force behind, for example, was a coaching panel, so that anybody who's a member of the Chief Executives Forum could talk to a professional coach, completely confidential and free. And that's been a service that's been going for months now. The bespoke, working with teams and working with organizations, and the quality of the webinars that have been put on. One springs to mind in particular, just to kind of bring it back to what you were asking, and Petra Kaur gave a very powerful presentation. Petra is the lead for the mental health psychological framework for dealing with COVID. And one of the things Petra did in her presentation was to start to talk about what's facing our teams and what are the challenges. And she talked about a lot of the things that you have just talked about so well, Siobhan. The future's uncertain, and the loss of what people thought they were going to be doing, maybe promotion or how their job was going to be, the loss of human contact, the worry about sickness, the worry about their own job, all of those things that have been affecting people. And then our next slide is what affects us as leaders, and it was exactly the same slide. And her point was, it's easy to forget when you're leading teams and managing that you're a human being too, that all of this stuff affects you as well. And that phrase that you used is brilliant. You can't set fire to yourself to keep other people warm. It won't last very long. In terms of the work that we've been doing and what we've been hearing from people, there's a couple of things, I suppose, that have come out. A number of different teams and organizations that we worked with. A common thing that they have said, and I don't know whether this rings true for people, but feeling resentment and then feeling guilty about feeling resentful. And what that kind of came from was, if it wasn't for the work that all of you were doing, things would have been so much worse. But it's all the work that people have put in place. It's all the things that have been done that have got us to where we are so far. And yet, if you look at the media sometimes, if you look at what's been going on, all of that's completely forgotten about. One of the common examples was that someone who's been dealing with an awful lot of stuff in terms of trauma, and then somebody texting her saying, this lockdown's absolutely terrible. I mean, I don't know how I'm supposed to do this homeschooling at all. And homeschooling is real, but at the same time, other people have been dealing with really, really difficult things. And it's recognizing that. We also had one senior leader with their team. And one of the points that they made was that it's easy when you're in that situation to forget what everyone is going through. And they pointed out they had just come back from a week's annual leave. And the entire team, the chat box lit up, and the entire team started saying, that's the first holiday they have taken in like 8 months. So, it was a team that was behind them. And what this person pointed out was, until they came back from that week's leave, they hadn't realized how terrible everybody else looked, how tired, how stressed, how dealing with all of these things. And it was only getting that break for themselves, they realized what was actually happening. One of the things I'd kind of like to echo with Anne, thanks very much for the presentation on the local government strategy, because it was brilliant and the strategy is great. But one of the things you've picked up on, and that Siobhan has picked up on, is the fact that you can't really lead other people until you look after yourself. You have to lead yourself first. And one of the things that has been a bit of a challenge that we have noticed is that often it's difficult. There's a culture where it's difficult to actually ask for help or to go and talk to another human being. I don't know whether he's a good person to quote or not, but a couple of years ago, Alistair Campbell was in Question Time. And one of the things that he said was, isn't it amazing that in the world of professional sport, no one in their right mind would dream of competing without getting the best support they possibly could, without getting coaches and a support team. The coaches and the support team don't run the race. They don't win the medal. They don't win the trophy. It's the person who does, but they wouldn't dream of competing without having a team there to look after them. We make fun of people who don't. And yet those people whose decisions have the biggest impact on our lives, like public servants, like senior leaders, like politicians, there's a culture almost of you can't be seen to get help. You can't be seen to talk to people. You can't even be seen to get coaching, because in some way, shape or form, it's seen as remedial or admitting defeat. And I was kind of wondering, how do we change that culture? Or have you any ideas, Siobhan, around how do we, it's not just about stigma, it's about almost how do we make it that actually it's a good thing to get support and get help to be the best leader that you can be? Because that's, I think, where it all starts.
Okay, thank you, Michael. Now, a couple of you had brought up a number of issues in the chat. So if Chris Smart is still there from the Department of Communities, could we go to you? You'd raised a query about the potential for getting funding for effectively an awareness raising app for young people. Now, very helpfully, both Antoinette and Marie-Therese from the Sports Council have come through on the chat with some guidance around one of their apps, which sounds really useful. And Anne, you had mentioned one, an app that had been developed as well and launched in your area. So I think it'd be useful to follow up both of those. But Chris, do you want to say a bit more about the query as you had received it from the Youth Council? Or the Youth Forum?
Yes, our minister is very keen to work with young people, and we all know with the current pandemic, unfortunately, young people are being hardest hit with falling out of employment, and the numbers, unfortunately, having to claim universal credit and benefit support is drastically increased. So there's a greater impact on the well-being of young people. We're doing our best in the Department of Community to make sure they get the right support through a range of initiatives that we have, including labour market initiatives to try and get them into work experience, working with colleagues in the economy to get them into apprenticeships and so forth. But their mental well-being, the forum put across very strongly that they're struggling to find services to help them and help the young people. But it was great, Antoinette, making that contact with us, and indeed Anne, very, very kind offer to share that up. I think it's something that really is hitting the heart and the mind and the souls of young people. We just got to make sure we coordinate our support and offer and make sure it's easily accessible. I mean, I wasn't aware of anything on sports or indeed in Anne's work, which is great to know now. So we can share that back into the forum, and I'll have a follow-up call with Antoinette to see what we can do from the Department of Community's point of view with that.
Great, thanks Chris. Siobhan, I know you wanted to come back on that one.
Yeah, sure. So the Public Health Agency have on their website, they have a list of apps, and actually Fiona asked me to publicise it, and I said I would do it yesterday, so I'm definitely going to remember to do it now. It's so important. And they have quality assured apps. I think it's really, so if you go onto any app store, you're going to get literally thousands of different apps, and some of the ones I know for suicide prevention aren't the safest. You know, some of the messages that are out there, and you need to be very careful. So I'll be publicising that. But as I said, one of the parts of my role is to be that network hub, and the minute I get my communications person, they're going to be looking at what's out there on the Mind in Your Head website and the app repository, and finding out how we can contribute, at least from now until April, to making that, turning that into the go-to place for your information about mental health and quality assured apps and interventions and things that are online, because there are so many. So I would go there as a first thing, but it's definitely something, because I know the Elephant in the Room group have this as a recommendation.
Yep.
And I'm taking it upon myself to try and make sure that all of their recommendations are translated into action, and they all can be actually. There's nothing there that's unrealistic. And I can see ways of doing it. So that's what we're going to do. But just be careful whenever we're talking about apps and things. try and just stick with the reputable organisations and the local. And, you know, the Education Authority told me the other week that there was no waiting lists for their counselling, you know, that they were providing services there and just to ask. So there are things out there that people maybe aren't aware of. The narrative that nobody cares, that nothing's happening, that's actually not true. There's so much going on, but yeah, that's part of my role as Network Hub. I need to be doing that and working with what's there rather than creating something new. I think it's pointless trying to reinvent the wheel when there's a lot of stuff happening. It's really about bringing them together a lot of the time.
And Anne has clarified that the app she was referring to is the Here to Help app.
It is really good. Yeah. Can I just go back to Michael's point about how do we help people ask for help, and how do you know what? This is not about other people, this is about us. And we need to model that, you know, we need to ask for help ourselves and be authentic, you know, and it's not about showing weakness or showing that we've lost control or anything like that. It's about saying, do you know what, this is my expertise, I need your help with this, can you do that? And you're giving other people their place, and you're allowing people to support you there as well, you know. So let's start to break down those barriers as leaders as well and ask for help, even for the small things in life. And we know that reciprocity, that principle, you know, if you allow somebody to give you something, then you'll be able to work with them in a better way, you know. So it's so important that we role model help, asking for help when we can and when it's appropriate to do so as well.
Well, that feels like a nice place to bring David Sterling back in, who wants to talk about collaboration.
Thanks to Michael, thanks to Anne, but particularly thanks to you, Siobhan, for what was a fantastic presentation. You covered a huge amount of ground there, and I think there were so many things to take out of it. One of the things I liked was that you were actually quite uplifting, because quite often when we're confronted with a mental health challenge, it's presented almost as something that's just so difficult that we're almost tempted to run away from it. Whole range of things, but one of the things I'm always interested in is collaboration. And you know, you talked about the wide range of services that are available, and you saw that as a reason not to be as depressed, if you like, about just the scale of the challenge as maybe sometimes we are. If you ask anybody, everybody says, yeah, we're all keen to collaborate. We recognize that collaboration is the way to get things done, but we're not as good at it as we should be. And I'm just wondering, is there some psychological perspective to this that we need to understand? You know, is there something that is blocking people from working with others, you know, from working across boundaries, that we need to have a better understanding of, so that we can actually help to break this, you know, break these barriers to collaboration down?
Yeah, I think it's about our own ego sometimes. It's about this idea. A lot of us are from a generation where we were told we could do anything, we could be anything. And there's, you know, we see the young people in our universities now, they've been told that. They've never had any hardship, a lot of them. And those are the ones that are also developing mental health problems. You know, they've been given everything and really indulged, maybe by parents who suffered themselves because of the troubles and everything else, and they're trying to get, you know, so we expect that we should be able to do things on our own, you know, and it's a feature of capitalism too, I guess, you know, where it's just us against the world. But I think we, you know, asking for help is not a weakness. It's a sign that actually we are in that safe and social space. We know the boundaries, and then we can give other people the confidence that we're working within our own area of expertise, and we will ask for help whenever we need help, and then they can do that as well. So it's about getting rid of the imposter syndrome and having a bit of self-esteem as well, you know, and then being able to recognise that we don't always have the answers. And none of us, absolutely none of us do. But I think we need to be in a very, very safe and calm space to be able to do that. So it's back to managing our own stress, really. We need to be right up there. You know, we don't have that fear that people will see us as weak. So we need to be really regulated in order to do it as well. And really insightful, you know, that self-awareness. Michael's looking to say something.
Yeah.
I'm about to give it a plug. Just to pick up on what David said. One of the things that we have found, especially in the last 6 months, we always cover collaboration in the Conscious Leader Programme. And in the last 6 months, we've done a series of webinars with the Chief Executives Forum. And different techniques for helping people to collaborate has been one of the really, really big things. I suppose in the experience that we're all through, a lot of the silos in some way have come down, and you put that so well, Siobhan, that the things that we thought couldn't be done suddenly can be done. But that in itself has led to difficulties then, because that initial stage, the emergency bit where we're all in it together and things can get done, when we comes to the stage where we realize it's a marathon, not a sprint, then we're wondering what are the reporting lines and who's in charge of what and who's responsible for this and who's going to pay for it. And it gets really tricky when it comes to collaboration. So one of the things that we've been working on with the webinars was there's a particular evidence-based framework called the well-formed outcome, which is a brilliant way of doing that, of helping people to work out what's within our control, what's outside our control, who do we need to talk to. And another webinar that actually I did with Lynn, planning for the future in an uncertain world, using a logical levels framework. A lot of the chat in the chat box was about that too. It was about using those frameworks to work out who do we need to collaborate with, how can we do that, and how can we do it in a way that we can decide ultimately who's responsible and who's accountable. So I don't know if that's helpful, but that's one of the things we've been doing. I've also actually been, just to realize that when we've been doing the webinars, we've been taking your name in vain, because there's a tweet you put up a while ago and we used the picture of it about collaboration. So I just thought I'd mention that.
Great. Thank you, Michael, for that input as well. It gives our members a very practical basis to try to improve collaboration.
Can I just come in there? Challenging conversations is something that I talk about a lot. Sometimes we really need to have those very, very difficult conversations, and we need to practice those, and we need to learn how to deliver bad news, or how to ask a really, really difficult question, so that we can start to work out who's going to take responsibility, who's going to pay for things, who's going to be accountable. And I think that's something as a leader you absolutely have to be comfortable with, having those really difficult conversations. So you can practice that when you're out and about, a complaint, asking for help, all of those things you can model and practice so that you can do it then as a leader. And that's, I think, if you're in avoidance mode and you're avoiding those difficult conversations, then it's just not going to work. So I think that's a key thing that we all need to learn about.
Okay, thank you. Roisin Marshall had also raised the whole issue around an update on the wider mental health strategy and where it sits in relation to individual sectors. And Roisin, you asked an interesting question. What, if anything, should we as individual groups be thinking about? So I don't know if you want to come back in on that before I go back to Siobhan.
No, not really. Just thanks for the chance to ask the question. It kind of was a bit answered as the webinar went on, but I think really, I suppose my main point here is that lots of organisations and groups are doing lots of things, and even, in terms of education, the EA are taking a lead in this. But I think because people don't always know what it is that we're trying to work towards, and sort of working, being aware of the strategy and then working towards that, you can spend a lot of energy doing a lot of things that actually, if our energies were more collective, might actually have a bigger impact. So I guess it's really just what are the plans for what is expected, and I'm particularly interested in education, obviously, and what is we as a group, because everybody runs around thinking, oh, I should be doing something about mental health, but actually maybe that's not what is required. It is required to inform yourself and be aware, and ultimately help schools to help their students.
Yeah, okay, so I missed Oscar, who's on the call, because I saw his face. Hello, Oscar. I missed the first meeting of the Strategic Advisory Panel for the Mental Health Strategy this morning. Somebody from my office was there. The idea is that it's going to go out for consultation before Christmas, I think, hopefully. That's the time scale. So when that goes out for consultation, it will be completely public, then people will be able to respond, and groups will be able to respond to that. But there is a process of co-design involved there. And I think that's something we need to actually put out more, and we need to think about a way of communicating from now until Christmas what's happening. It's something we could look at, but so that's the sort of timescale that we're talking about. So we'll find out very, very quickly. So I wouldn't go rushing to just wait and see now for the next couple of months, because it is going to be there. And of course, the action plan is in there as well. It's been published. It's on the Department of Health's website. So it's just a time of there's so much happening, but we're going to be seeing more soon. So hold out.
Great. Well, we've just hit 1:30, and I think it's been a very, very valuable session. I want to say thank you before we wrap up as well to Una Wilson from the Equality Commission for just pointing us in the direction of their mental health charter, which has many sources of support as well. Final chance for anyone who has a burning question. I don't think I see any hands up or any further questions on the chat. But I want to say a huge thank you to Siobhan for giving us her time today. Clearly a very, very busy person, but as we're all agreed, a really, really vital role, and we're delighted that you're in it and that you're able to engage with us like this today. And I think that whole co-design process that's kicking off now will be really, really important and will impact on all of us. I want to say thanks as well to Michael and Anne for their contributions, and for everyone who got involved on the chat. And to say again a big welcome to David, and I think that's been a very successful first event. And I don't know, David, if you want to wrap up before we finish.
Okay, thanks, Anne. At the risk of repetition, again, thanks to Michael and thanks, Dan. Special thanks to Siobhan, and we got so many good messages there, and I would encourage everybody to pass on, to share the slides that you've got today, to share Anne's mental health strategy that's been developed for local government, because there's a lot in all that we've seen and heard today that bears sort of wider repetition. I think Siobhan would all want to wish you well. You've got a really important role there. If the forum can do anything to help you at any stage, please do ask. I see this as being just one of many sessions that I think will be worth doing on this particular topic, because it is one of the big issues of our time and is likely to remain so. I suppose there's so many things I could pick up on, but I think the one thing I'd like to leave everybody with is just that thought about our own role, what we can do as leaders in all of this. And I think it is really, really important that we are role models. We are all leaders, and the people who we work with, they listen to what we say, they watch what we do, and the behaviors that we exude set the standards that run throughout our organizations. So if we don't look after ourselves, we're sending out the wrong signals. And I think that's one thing that's really important. One of the kindest things that was said to me a few years ago was that what we like about you, David, is when you go on leave, you turn off the BlackBerry, you don't keep working while you're on leave. That gives all of us a license to take our holidays properly. And it was something that really struck me and stayed with me. So I think we do need to be that calm, accessible leader that you described, Siobhan, and we do need to look after ourselves and set standards for others. So that will be my sort of final message for today, and I'd just like to thank everybody for joining. I think it has been a great session, and I look forward to many more over the weeks and months ahead. And do you maybe just want to formally tell everybody to switch off then?
Yeah, well, my colleague Pamela is in the most powerful position of us all. She will end the meeting now shortly, and best wishes everyone. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you.